this is Jamie Dyer welcoming you to another edition of the Quo-Cast. And if you'd like to be a guest on a future episode of the podcast, then you can. You can email quocast@outlook.com. That's quocast@outlook.com. You can tweet at the Quo-Cast on Twitter, or you can go to the Facebook page, facebook.com/the Quo-Cast. So I present to you here an interview that I did with Alan Lancaster in 2011 for a charity radio broadcast that I did for Macmillan Cancer Support. Now, it's important to note I was 21 years old. I'd been doing radio for about maybe 2 years by that point, but I'd only just started doing it from home, and I hadn't had much experience over the phone. So imagine the first time that you do all these things, you're talking to one of your heroes. I was so nervous. And it's funny that at the beginning of the recording that I have, I say to him, I am about to, I'll talk to you for about 10 minutes, right? This will take about 10 minutes. About 35 minutes later, we're still talking. So I was extremely inexperienced at this point in timings and goodness knows what. But I thought I would present this to you because this really is a moment in time, right? To put some context on it, Quo had just released Quid Pro Quo. There had been some talk about Alan and Francis kind of talking, and things like Hello Quo and the reunion tours were not quite there yet. You know, I think there'd been some buzz, but all of those things hadn't happened yet. So this is slap bang in the middle of that, the summer of 2011. So what I'm going to do is play you some highlights from that interview that I conducted over Skype through telephone at 3 a.m, when I had a lot more time than I do now. And I will interject occasionally with some extra context. So without further ado, I present to you this interview that I did with Alan Lancaster in 2011. Oh, and I should note that the sound quality isn't as good as it would be if I did it now. I've tried to clean it up as best I can, but everything is still audible. Let's go. I have Mr. Alan Lancaster on the phone. Hi, Alan.
Hi, Jamie. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. How are you?
All right. Nice and warm.
That's good, because you're in sunny Australia.
Yeah, although it's winter here.
Oh, right. Does it get like sunny in the winter as well then?
It's like winter's like a British summer, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess so. But it's been quite warm here. But I suppose not as warm as it is.
It's been very, very nice this year. The weather, isn't it? It's fantastic.
Yeah. So, are you playing in any kind of bands to this day?
I'm not playing at the moment. Not gigging at the moment. Although I've still got my I've still got bands playing if I want to. You know, the Party Boys is one of my bands over here, but I've got my own band, which is the Lancaster Bombers, if I want to do it. But I've not been playing live for about a year or so, a couple of years. And I'm thinking of doing it again soon. It's hard work playing live.
I can imagine, because obviously what with Quo's big hefty kind of tour schedule, you know, back in kind of the early and mid days, I should think you were very much on your feet a lot of the time.
Yeah, Quo was never ending. The touring with Quo was always, because Quo's a live band. That's basically what Status Quo was all about. We were, you know, right from the very early days, it was always about playing live. That was our thing. We weren't really a recording band as such. That was sort of part of it, of course, but we were mainly a live act, and always have been, and that's really where you earn your living.
Yeah.
Basically, I mean, sometimes you get fed up with it, but your favourites are really the live stuff, which you perform live. I mean, obviously you've got a few studio songs you like, but really what you play live is sort of your favourites, really, because you're playing quite a lot every night, aren't you? And if you didn't like it, I don't think you'd put it into a set.
Yeah.
So really, subconsciously and directly, really, the live stuff's the favourite stuff.
Yeah. Which of the kind of live stuff that you played, would you class as your favourite, or is there something you still like playing now? Or
well, yeah, I mean, stuff I'm still playing now. Really, when I go out on the road, I mean, Roll Over, Lay Down is one of my favourites. 4,500 times a favourite of mine, although that's really kind of tightly attributed to Quo. Really, it's a really personal one. 4,500 times, but as I said. Roll Over, Lay Down, 4,500 times, that kind of stuff is still what I play now.
Some versions of like 4,500 times will go on for like 20 minutes. I mean, you must have had a lot of stamina to do that kind of thing.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's funny with the releases, the BBC releases recently. I just realised how long that number goes for, and how much memory is required for it. I mean, the arrangement was built over a number of years. It developed from a song I wrote, actually, Is It Really Me? And we had a long arrangement in that. And 4,500 times gradually took over from that. It developed over a number of years. A set takes many years, really. A good set takes quite a few years to develop. It's not something you can do overnight. And you gradually build on it and change the odd number here and there from tour to tour. But it's a set is something that doesn't come easy. It's not something you just write a few songs down so that's going to work. It's something that works over a number of years, or you develop over a number of years.
Yeah. I mean, I know that Quo often gets slated even now because their set kind of stays the same. Do you think that perhaps when you were in the band that the set kind of changed a bit more, or?
Well, we changed it, but it was changed gradually. You wouldn't put more than 2 or 3 changes in a set per tour, but it did used to change gradually. I don't know how much they change it now, but I think they're probably playing more now than what we used to. I'm not sure. I don't know if the touring schedule is as heavy as what we used to. How it used to be with us, and how often they change their set. But changing the set is quite a big thing, even one number. You like to, when you're on stage, you'd like to be on an automatic pilot. It takes quite a lot of energy. You get used to it, but it takes a lot of energy on stage. Physically and mentally, and you have to remember things. So you have to really, really be well rehearsed to settle down, to be relaxed and get on with the job. Because if you're not, you just break out in cold sweats and hot and cold sweats.
Yeah.
And we're stressed with it, but we were never stressed out. Of course, we used to be well rehearsed and take lots of chances on stage. Yeah, I think the well-rehearsed bit is not so much sitting in a room practicing or rehearsing. It's more getting on the road and actually doing it. That's where your main rehearsal comes, and you're actually doing it for real, the experience part of it. And just a few warm-up numbers beforehand keeps you going. But you can't just, for instance, rehearse a set and get on the road. Oh, this is our set. It takes time, takes experience and the build-ups. So, yeah. People don't realise that, actually.
Yeah. Moving away from Quo kind of very slightly, but kind of keeping on this touring subject, you went on to be with, like, as you say, the Party Boys and the Bombers. And I had a question recently from someone who wanted to know why the Bombers only toured Australia and Sweden and not the rest of Europe.
Well, touring any band costs a lot of money. It costs money. Yeah, and to make money out of it, you have to be very, very careful. You can lose every time. It's like anything, playing in a band, dancing, sport. They're very expensive hobbies. And when you're doing something like a tour in a band, you can, it's really, really costly. You're talking about flights, accommodation. So you've got to, the only way you can offset that is by having people come to see you and actually pay to come to see you. If that doesn't happen, you can only do it for so long before you go broke.
Yeah.
So what a band like the Bombers is a new band, and therefore it's a new brand. It's not like Status Quo, or any other brand. It's there. People know about it, and there's a certain amount of customers, if you like, or people want to see it. So that means you can plan and do a tour where you can survive. But for most bands, they haven't got a brand name, or they lose money. And that's the whole thing about touring. And as much as we love it, as much as we like playing, as much as people like playing their music, it does come down to money in the end. And that's the actual fact of making music too. It's like people say, why don't you release stuff? Well, releasing music, writing and all that kind of stuff takes a lot of time and a lot of money.
Yeah.
Making music costs money, a heap of money. It's very, very costly. And it's all right for people to say, why don't you do this or why don't you do that? It's the cost factor. Unless you've got everything lined up at the same time, management, publicists, booking agents, promoters, marketing, you've got your songs and your band together, your transport, everything, then you're going to lose a lot of money. So, and it's the same with making records. Unless you've got an outlet for it, then it's a waste of time and money.
Yeah.
And, the only time it's worth doing that is in the early days when you're young and very young, and you can have flop after flop for a while and still have people interested in you to carry on. But when you're starting a new brand off like the Bombers, it's like starting from scratch. It's not like say, we're going up with Status Quo with a new lineup. I mean, Status Quo's a brand. Everybody knows Status Quo. So what it does is a certain amount of people is going to be interested in what they do.
This is the Quo-Cast, and you're listening to a 2011 interview that I conducted with Alan Lancaster for a charity broadcast. And around this time, Francis Rossi had released his second solo studio album about a year before. It was called One Step at a Time, and it led to a live album and tours and all the rest of it, live at St. Luke's. Definitely recommend that. There's lots of rare Quo tracks performed, as well as tracks from that album. And Alan and I, in this next clip, talk about the idea of Quo as solo artists.
I was going to say, I speak to Francis the other day, and he's doing some solo stuff. I think I'm the only one. I'm the only one in the band that's ever done that. I've had to do it for a number of years, in the past. Not so much there. People say, why I don't do it now? It's because it's a costly exercise. Francis is doing one, although he's got his Status Quo brand, just like I did. He wouldn't be able to sustain a solo or a band, even when you're using your own name. It's not a brand, so he wouldn't be doing sort of stuff either. It's the same scenario.
I mean, had you ever considered kind of doing solo stuff on your own?
No. None of us are solo artists. A solo artist is a certain breed of person, and none of us in the band are that talented enough to be a solo artist. We haven't got the voices, we haven't got the together we make, we'll top any solo artists, because together we fit like a jigsaw puzzle, and all the parts fit and something good comes out of it. That's how you get a recipe or a brand. As solo artists, none of us are solo artists. We've all got we did have a certain little bit of, individuality, but we're not solo artists. We're parts of a recipe. Most solo artists, they do the thing. There's no such thing really as a solo artist, is there? Unless you're playing the guitar and singing all on your own. That's all you've got, or piano on your own. You can't really sing and play the trumpet, can you? So a solo artist is someone who sings and accompanies themselves, really. But most solo artists have got bands and orchestras behind them anyway, so they're not really solo artists in that respect. So a solo artist, really is somebody that conjures everything up himself. But every solo artist has musical directors, writers, musicians, everybody doing the thing, and the people go to see only that solo artist, like Shirley Bassey or whoever. They go to see that one thing. The members of Status Quo never had that quality, never had that type of talent. We're all talented to a certain level, but we weren't talented as a solo artist. But most front people in bands that go on to be solo artists don't really make it.
I mean, your son David, he's in a band, isn't he? It's The Presence, is that right?
Yeah, excellent band. One of the best live rock bands I've seen for a while, I have to be quite honest. And he's doing really well. He's got a good voice too, and write great songs. But I said to him, it means nothing. Writing great songs, recording great songs, even having a great band, that means absolutely nothing. It's a different... Making it in the music industry requires a different set of factors from that. It requires those factors too, but it requires a lot extra. It's most important thing is playing live.
Yeah, and obviously playing live is an important thing. I mean, have you ever thought about kind of, joining him on stage or playing with him on stage?
No, because it's a different type of band. It's a serious band, and they can, they're very, very good. They actually tear a place up. They play with the Radiators, of course, quite a famous band over here the other night, and had a fantastic gig. But it's not the type of band where you jump up on stage and jam with, so to speak.
No.
Least of all me, really.
I mean, would you say that, like the music you've done in Quo or perhaps the Bombers, would you call it kind of serious music, or was it kind of...
Yeah, it's very... the actual style, although it's not Quo's style, the sort of boogie beat. It's very progressive rock, good songs, but it's got this kind of 70s nostalgic feel to it. So they're very good songs. It's hard rock, but they're good songs. They've got these nice bits to them, slightly subtle chording to them, which I really like the stuff.
Yeah.
And I would be proud if I was in Quo, my Quo was still going, I would have been proud to have the material for my own band, for Quo.
Yeah.
So it was, what I'm trying to say is the music that they're writing and performing, Dave's band, the Presence.
Oh, right, okay.
Is hard rock music, but it's got a very, they've got very good chording. They're very good songs, not just straight, full-on rock with no kind of way to go. Just it's they're quite well composed, the songs.
Yeah. Listening to some earlier in preparation for this, I could hear some of that influence. I mean, do you think some of your music has perhaps had an influence on the stuff that he writes?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, without a doubt. I mean, in fact, strangely enough, it's one of his biggest influences is the Bombers album that I made, the Aim High album.
Oh yes, yeah, very good album.
In fact, the band, the drummer, listens to that. So they listen to that quite a lot, even after all these years. I mean, it must be 20 or so years old. But they say that's one of their biggest influences, strangely enough.
Just myself listening to that album, I can see some of your influences. I mean, what are some of your influences with that album?
With my thing?
Yeah.
I mean, my influence is Bob Dylan and people like that, and Jerry Lee Lewis, Bob Dylan, and as far as lyrics and meanings of songs goes, you've got Dylan, and as far as the hard rock goes, you've got Jerry Lee Lewis. And that's really where my influence come from, Chuck Berry, people like that. And I suppose when you listen to the Quo stuff, there is a lot of that in there,
Yeah.
There's a lot of Chuck Berry, the storytelling, and you've got the Jerry Lee Lewis, the harder rock, and you've got a bit of Dylan in there with a bit of kind of, bit of nicety.
Yeah.
So, looking back, those influences did come out in a strange way. But I like pop music as much as anybody else as well, but the only thing that I could play properly well is hard rock. That was our thing.
And I've also read recently that you've started writing a book. Is this correct?
Yeah, I've started writing a book a couple of years back, and then I realised, again, it's like making records, like touring. It requires a lot of money to write a book, unless you want to just waste your time and leave it on the shelf. And I started writing the book. There's people very interested, I've got publishers interested, of course, and I realised that to write it properly, I'd need a proper side ghostwriter, or not even a ghostwriter, somebody actually writes it for me while I'm supplying all the information in my style.
Yeah.
I don't want to write it well. I don't want to just a thing just throw it, in the trunk, in the trash after a while. I just wanted something for a library, something that people can reference and for their own thing. So I want to do a good one. I don't just want to do a trashy one. So I've engaged Anthony O'Grady, who's a top writer over here, to help me with it, and he's been doing transcripts and interviews, all that kind of thing, to get it right for me.
Yeah.
But since the reconciliation with Quo, the whole, what's the word, the whole style of it, not so much the style, the tenor of it has changed. There's been obviously the ending is a big change in the ending. So a couple of things have been put on hold with it, but we haven't finished it yet in a nutshell. And because we haven't finished, the reason we haven't finished it is because we had editorials lined up, etc., which helped finance the writers to do it, to get it out, etc. But we haven't done that for some reasons, for personal reasons, and we haven't forgotten about the book. That's on the way, but it's how to do it. Not, we can do it. You can write it easy enough, but it's how we go about publishing it, because none of us are keen to waste their time. We'd like to. It's not, writing is not wasted time, but releasing it is a big effort.
Yeah, and I'm sure it'd be, a very popular read amongst Quo fans once it comes out.
Well, it's quite amazing, really, over the years, how the history, how people think about Quo, what the breakup was about. There's so many different stories upon stories, and there's actually, I can't blame fans or our supporters for thinking that way or believing that way, because actually some of the wrong things are actually published in interviews and biographies. There's a lot of things that's been printed that's totally inaccurate and absolutely wrong. Even their early biographies. And I'm guilty as anybody for that, because we were flippant in the early days, used to say things that weren't accurate. And years later, those things, those inaccuracies have been built upon to make more inaccuracies. So it'd be good to get something out to put everything right. I mean, Francis and I often talk about the old days, and there's so many things that come up, memories.
Yeah, so many things that kind of come back to you.
Well, yeah, they're always there. They're not really coming back, but we remember everything like it was yesterday.
Yeah.
Talk, things like, he says, things that I think about over the years, many years. When we got on the phone, I said, you still remember that? Which was like when we're 12, 13 years old.
Yeah.
It might have been when we were 11 years old. No, it must have been when we were 12 years old. We remember things, what we were doing at 12 years old, things that our parents said to us, when we were together, things that embarrassed us, and little things that stayed on our minds for all these years have stayed on both our minds.
This is the Quo-Cast, and you're listening to a 2011 interview that I conducted with Alan Lancaster for a charity broadcast. And in this next segment, we talk about Quo's then current album, Quid Pro Quo, which got to number 10 in the UK albums chart.
Have you heard any of kind of Quo's recent output? Has Francis kind of played it?
Yeah, they sent me the new album. I've listened to that, and I've not listened to much stuff of their past stuff, but this one I've listened to. I've sat down and listened to.
Yeah,
it's a completely different style. Quo's recording music today is a completely different sound and a completely different style to what it was when it was my band, which is obvious. I mean, you've got three major players. There's three different players in there that are a major part of the band, so it's obviously going to sound different no matter what you do. It's like having two guitars and a bass and drums and changing it to, two trumpets, euphonium and percussion. You get the same people, the same band, but if you've got different instruments, it's going to sound different, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
It's like the same with people. People play instruments differently, no matter who it is. And, even when I remember when the best substitute for any band member in Quo was Pete Kircher.
Yeah.
Well, Pete Kircher was, he took over John's parts, but he actually didn't just do Pete Kircher. He did John Coghlan. He didn't replace John Coghlan, he substituted him. He actually copied things so well that I thought he played some of them better. But he actually copied him. So that was why it worked so well with Pete Kircher. But he was only there for a short period of time, of course. Got a great drummer.
Yeah. I mean, do you still keep in touch with kind of John or Pete or anyone?
I do John a lot. I don't Pete. I haven't spoken to Pete ever since Live Aid. But John I keep in touch with regularly, as I do Francis and now and Rick, etc. Not Rick so much. He's a bit elusive, but we still keep in touch.
Well, no, that's good, because obviously you had several years where you didn't speak to them, and now you're you're kind of
It's politics though. You can't. You see, people just don't get this. A band member, a musician, is a self-proprietor. He's a business.
Yeah.
It's not just Francis Rossi or Alan Lancaster. Both those people are are businesses. They're sole proprietary businesses. And when something goes, and because we're musicians, we're not business people, we have to have other people running it for us. And most self-proprietary businesses, like musicians, have to join up with other musicians in partnerships to make things work. You don't usually do it totally on your own. You're always in partnership with somebody. And when something goes wrong, it's usually the administrators that have to deal with it. We as musicians wouldn't have a clue. We wouldn't know. If Francis or Rick came to me or John or anyone and said, Al, this is wrong, you've got to give us this, you've got to give us that, I wouldn't have a clue. I'd say, very well, I'll give it to my manager there, I'll give it to so-and-so, I'll give it to my lawyer, I'll give it to so-and-so, I'll let them sort it out. Because I wouldn't know. It's happened to me before in Quo with Roy Lyons. Roy Lyons had to sue us all. I didn't even know he sued us until a couple of years ago. This was in the 70s. He sued us. It took him 10 years for him to get paid his royalties where he was due.
Yeah.
I didn't even know about it. So it's a strange situation, although it's Alan Lancaster that will probably owe Roy Lyons money, I wouldn't know what to do, how to go about it, where it's come from, what it's for. And it's the same with Francis and Rick. We wouldn't know, and John. We wouldn't know. So when anything goes wrong, we're the ones that are accountable and responsible, and we're the ones that didn't do it wrong. Well, we did no wrong, but we're the ones that are accountable. It's the same all the way down the line with musicians. The buck stops with the musician, but there were others, managers, lawyers, and all those kind of things, are sorting it out or making it worse, or rubbing their hands together thinking, okay, we can make a lot of money out of fees from this by keeping these guys, in combat, so to speak. So it's not a matter of not speaking with one another because we can't speak because we don't want to. It's because basically we can't.
Yeah.
We don't run our own business. We're the product. We create things. So when Alan Lancaster does something wrong, it's either Alan Lancaster the man or Alan Lancaster the proprietor. Same with Rossi and Parfit and Coghlan. They're proprietors as well as human beings, and other people look after the business, not us. The manager may know nothing about the situation like their managers now. Obviously don't know anything about the things when I were in the band because they weren't there.
Yeah.
And so they have to get others to help them. So it's a very, very long, tedious process when things go wrong. And of course, a lot of business things went wrong with Status Quo because of the early days, the way it was set up. I mean, they were all verbal contracts in the early days, or a lot of things were, and we're all individually contracted. So and it was all very loose. Yeah, and now things are pretty tight.
Well, yeah, so they can keep that brand in check. But yeah, I'm afraid we've actually run out of time, but thank you very much for talking to us. And
pleasure, Jamie.
It's much, much appreciated. And of course, before this conversation, you and I have never spoken before, so it's...
No, you've got a good radio voice by the sounds of it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I try.
That's me, Jamie Dyer, talking to Alan Lancaster in 2011 for a charity broadcast. And it's amazing to me listening all this time later. Obviously, I'm nervous, but it's important to know that at the time I was doing it for an audience that perhaps weren't as familiar with Quo, even though some of the questions that I asked there were taken from the old Quo message board, because I put up a thing asking people to submit them. But I can't believe all this time later, look, I'm doing a Status Quo fan podcast. And if you are listening, Alan, or if anybody connected to Alan is listening, I would love to do a follow-up interview 10 years later. That would be amazing. No pressure, but, that would be an amazing thing to try and organize. What did you make of what Alan said there back in 2011 before all of the documentary, the reunion tours, all the extra bits and pieces that went with that? What did you make of that then? I thought then, wow, this is amazing. I had no idea what was around the corner. And if you'd like to be a guest on a future episode of the Quo-Cast, then you can. Just email quocast@outlook.com. That's quocast@outlook.com. You can tweet at the Quo-Cast on Twitter, or you can go to the Facebook page, which is just simply facebook.com/the Quo-Cast.